It's the SNL Hall of Fame podcast with your host, Jamie Dew, Chief Librarian Thomas Senna, and featuring Matt Ardill. And now, curator of the hall, Jamie Dew.
All right, thank you so much, Doug DeNance. It is great to be here inside the SNL Hall of Fame. You may have arrived yesterday only to find that the doors were locked. Well, it's Thanksgiving here in Canada, and that explains that. Because this is, of course, where the hall is located, in my recording studio in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. How are you doing, everybody? I hope you're well. Whoa, hold on. That doesn't mean come inside. You got to wipe those feet first. Now that you're here, the SNL Hall of Fame podcast is a weekly affair. Each episode, we take a deep dive into the career of a former cast member, host, musical guest, or writer, and add them to the ballot for your consideration. Once the nominees have been announced, we turn to you, the listener, to vote for the most deserving and help determine who will be enshrined for perpetuity inside the hall. It's really quite simple how this game works. We invite a guest on to tackle one of our nominees. They build the case for them. You listen, and you ultimately get to cast the vote to determine whether or not they make it inside the hall. This year, we'll be doing things a little bit differently. You will be getting an email if you have registered in the past to remind you to vote, but there is no actual registering to vote this year. You can just vote with your email address and you'll be good to go. So there's that. This week on the program, we have a good one for you. We always have a good one for you. I need to strike that. Can you strike that from the record, please? Very few people understand the operation here at the Hall of Fame, but we do have a stenographer that sits beside me as I recite this introduction, and she's wonderful. She's just wonderful. She's like her fingertips are like lightning, She does a great spine massage as well. Anyway, before we go too much further into this and I incriminate myself, let's head over to Matt's Minutia Minute, because I understand Matt is chomping at the bit this week to talk about David Bowie, who we will be joined by Ryan McNeil in the recording cellar with Thomas to talk about David Bowie and his nomination. But before that, as always, we are going to track down our friend Matt, and he is going to talk to us in the...
Oh, Jamie.
Yes, Matt.
Oh, Jamie.
Yes, I know you.
I am very excited about this one.
I know.
You're going to have a hard time stopping me talking, my friend.
Okay, let's just do it.
Can't wait. Davy Jones, a.k.a. David Bowie, was born January 8th, 1947. He was 5'10". Now, along with Tim Curry in the Rocky Horror Picture Show, David is the source of a lot of my youthful sexual awakenings. Little bit of TMI off the top, but just thought I'd get that out of the way. Born in London's working-class borough of Brixton, David Robert Jones changed his name so he was not confused with Davy Jones of the Monkees. Another heartthrob, but for very different reasons. He had a rather unremarkable musical career early on, with his choir teacher calling his voice adequate. But he found inspiration in artists including the Teenagers, the Platters, FatsDomino, Elvis Presley, and Little Richard, of whom he said upon hearing Tutti Frutti, he declared that he had heard the voice of God. That early rock and roll really shook shook people to their bones. And, if somebody's going to be the voice of God, I want it to be Little Richard. Now, he had some pretty incredible childhood friends, one of whom was Peter Frampton, who he met when he went to Bromley Technical High School, where Frampton's dad was teaching David Bowie art and possibly creating the future of music. secondhand. Just shows the importance of teachers. He was also at this time David Jones was friends with a certain Reginald Kenneth Dwight, a.k.a. Elton John. Sadly, they drifted apart as their fame began to grow and did not have a chance to reconcile prior to David's death. David formed his first band at the age of 15 called the Conrads, a skiffle band aping the sound of the Beatles and other British skiffle bands of the time, which drew from U.S. guitar music and blues. He drifted from band to band, including the King Bees and the Lower Third, before striking out on his own as David Jones. That didn't last long, shortly after he changed his name. His first release was the single Can't Help Thinking About Me, flopped, like all of his prior efforts with his bands to date. During his hippie era, David began working with producer extraordinaire Tony Visconti, who continues to talk about working with David to this day, and their relationship continued up until David's passing. He studied dramatic arts under Lindsay Kemp, including avant-garde theater, mime, comedy dell'arte, and all of this really does carry through to a lot of Bowie's performances, which embrace movement, extreme performance, and honestly, a lot of the time, comedy of the absurd. His career exploded out of the gate with Space Oddity, which was released at a very timely moment, right before the moon landing. The BBC decided to use the song over top of their coverage of the moon landing, and that catapulted him from an obscure hippie to one of the most influential musicians. That catapulted him from obscure hippie to one of the most influential musicians of the 20th century. Over his career, he embraced a host of characters, including the most famous being Ziggy Stardust, the Thin White Duke, and Aladdin Sane. But he also included characters like Major Tom and art detective Nathan Alder. His first song in character was the 1967 bassoon-driven single, The Laughing Gnome, which is as weird as the name makes it sound. Seriously, listen to it. Your life will be changed. There's a tiny talking gnome. I thought I dropped acid. I haven't dropped acid since high school. It was triggering. He has 99 composer credits, 38 film acting credits, including the alien refugee Tom Jerome Newton in The Man Who Fell to Earth, and source of much sexual consternation, Jareth in Labyrinth, not to mention a delightful cameo as himself in Zoolander, and appearance on Broadway and in London's West End as the Elephant Man. His first recording, I Never Dreamed, was recorded in 1963 when he was 16 and a member of the Conrads. His fellow bandmate and drummer, David Hadfield, was moving house in 1990 and found it in a bread box wrapped in wax paper. So you can actually go back and hear that. Young David Bowie, big difference from later David Bowie. Now, a myth about David is that he has heterochromia, but he does not. What happened was he was punched in the eye by a band member and developed a condition called anoscleria, a permanently dilated pupil, which is the cause of why some people think that eye is a slightly different color. Many songs were inspired by his brother, who suffered from complex mental health issues, including Jump, they say. These issues led to him being institutionalized and, sadly, his eventual suicide. Bowie is a cultural icon, so much so that there are multiple Barbies that have been released celebrating his unique looks, and I am sad that none of them appeared in the Barbie movie. An innovator, he launched his own ISP in 1996 called Bowie.net, which is one of the earliest social media platforms where he basically invented the AMA. Not long after, he also pioneered artists monetizing their products and creations by selling shares in David Bowie. you could own a share of Bowie. I don't know what part I'd want to own, but I wish I had had the money at the time. His last album, Black Star, was released on his birthday, January 8th in 2016. A deep, penetrating meditation on death, loss, regret, pain, and hope, ultimately. 2 days later, he died at the age of 69. His life ended as it was lived, a piece of art.
Yes, indeed, Jamie and Matt, thank you so much. I am down here in the recording cellar, and I will not leave until the business at hand is done. Today, we are talking about David Bowie, and here to discuss all things Bowie and SNL with me is a great guest that we've had on. This is his 5th time on the podcast.
Do I get a jacket?
Well, I see, I think our previous 5-timers have just been okay, Ryan, with like
your
bragging rights,
Right.
and they're we could send you business cards if you want something like that.
See, I make that joke, and yet I'd say at least a dozen people who have been on my own show 5 times. I have nothing for them. I don't have stickers. I don't have buttons. Nada. I've got people who've been on like 7, 8, 9 times. I don't even not even a gift basket. So I'm just happy for the acknowledgement.
Yeah. Well, rest assured, we have nothing for you as well. So
perfect.
You don't feel the need to pay it forward with this. So Ryan's been on. Ryan McNeil has been on for the Prince episode. He's been on to talk about Justin Timberlake, Bill Murray. Dave Grohl was a wonderful episode. We gotten a lot of great feedback still on the Dave Grohl episode. And Ryan McNeil, host of the Matinee Cast as well, a podcast over 300 episodes now. Ryan, geez, tell me
one of these days I hope to get paid. But when we recorded 300 this year, it was wild to think that I'd been doing it as long as I have. There's times my cat every once in a while will make an appearance, so I do apologize to your listeners.
My cat makes appearances too.
Okay, if they hear Lord Baelish crying, he's crying for nothing really. 300 episodes. There's times where I think nobody's listening, just like any other show. But it's been great. I've met some really fantastic people doing it. I've seen some fantastic films that I might not have otherwise have seen, and it's part of the reason why I got the job I have. I'm not podcasting for a living, but I was able to put myself out there and kind of create a portfolio beyond just my own work of, if you're interested in learning about me, go listen to this, because this is, something I create and can give you an idea of who you're talking to.
Yeah, it's a good one. And this is coming out in mid-October. Is there anything specifically that you might have in mind for around
mid-October? We'll be getting into a new season. I usually take September off because it's kind of a wasteland for movies, and coming out of the Toronto International Film Festival, I can usually use a bit of a breath. So we'll be starting a whole new season of shows mid-October. I think the new Scorsese will be showing up by then, so
Killers of the Flower Moon.
Yeah, we'll probably have an episode dedicated to that for sure.
Yeah, that's a good one. I just read the book, by the way, so I'm really looking forward to the movie. If it's anything like the book, it's going to be outstanding, I think. So
definitely,
that's the Matinee Cast, of course, with Ryan McNeil. Go check that out. And today, here on the SNL Hall of Fame, we are talking about another musical guest again, David Bowie. And Ryan, this is your 3rd musical guest that you've been on for, of course, Prince and Dave Grohl. And I find it fascinating how viewers of SNL and voters of the SNL Hall of Fame look at musical guests. And I'm curious, why do you think people have been so hesitant to vote musical guests into the SNL Hall of Fame at this point? Paul Simon's the only one that's in now. I'll pat us on the back and say I think we did a great job advocating for Dave Grohl. But why do you think voters might be hesitant to put musical guests into the Hall?
I do think that the musical component of SNL is something that the most avid viewers, they go get a beer during that part of the show, especially if it's a band they don't know. I've actually discovered a lot of bands because they were on SNL, and I kind of felt a little foolish for not having known about them before, because SNL, as much as they can promote music and create an interesting showcase for a wide array of artists, and I got to give them credit for that too. They really have all kinds of different musicians on. It's not what everybody tunes in for. So if it's not your thing, if you're waiting for update, or if you're waiting for, the next round of the Target Lady, or the next round of the Wild and Crazy Guys, the Strunk Brothers, or whatever you happen to be waiting for, that part of the show doesn't latch for you. This is just one of those things for me where the Venn diagrams overlap, where the comedy nerd and the musical nerd are both delighted at the same moment. So I know that's not everybody, and that's cool. Get from things what you want to get from things. But for me, it's one of the highlights of SNL is the way they can work with a musical act and the way they can highlight and promote and foster musical careers.
Yeah, I'm sometimes that way too. I'll admit, I oftentimes, especially if it's a musical guest I've never heard of, I'll use that time to go use the restroom or let my dogs out for one last pee before they go to sleep for the evening. So that is like a convenient break in between. I know I'm not going to miss update. I know I want to see what sketches come up. So unfortunately, like something sometimes in an hour and a half has to kind of fall through the cracks for some people, and this does. But depending on the artist. And I think the one we're talking about today, if I was, I was watching SNL for probably 2 or 3 of his appearances, but in his prime, there's no way I would have gotten out of my seat to go do whatever, get a snack or whatever. I would have been glued to the TV.
Of course. To
watch David Bowie. So there's those certain artists that you just have to, I think, just stay there for. And I think we're talking about one of them today, Ryan, in David Bowie. And I wanted to ask you to start off, like, if you just can put into context for anybody who might not totally be familiar, anybody who wants to reminisce, like where David Bowie was, like on the rock star hierarchy, like throughout the 70s. His first appearance was 79. So where kind of throughout the 70s, kind of where was Bowie in that hierarchy?
What's interesting about him showing up for the first time in 79 is it's not like our Dave Grohl episode where the first time Dave Grohl shows up, he's still got that new car smell. Like he looks like he's going to freak out if he misses a beat. David Bowie, by the time he shows up in 79, he's been going full tilt for 11 years. He is fully formed. He is deeply in the rock Parthenon at that point. He's influencing other artists behind him. He will influence other artists who come after him. And watching that first appearance, I mean, if somebody is going to go back and watch these appearances in order, the only downside is the first one is the best, and they're all kind of shuffle in between after that. But that first episode that he appears in 79, he is firing on all cylinders. He's actually a little bit subdued in terms of how weird he will be and how weird he'll get later. He's a little, he's a little glossy in this era. He's kind of in between personae. But when he shows up, that's the great thing, is he is showing up at his prime. It's like watching Muhammad Ali fight, as a 26-year-old and beating Sonny Liston. It's an incredible thing to witness.
Yeah, I agree. I think this might be this Bowie appearance. It was season 5, early in season 5. It was season 5, episode 7. So that was December of 79. I think it was arguably in those early years, maybe the biggest get that SNL had. I mean, as far as we could run through, I'm sure I'm missing someone, but there are few musicians around that time who were as big as Bowie. So I'm venturing to guess, like they didn't have McCartney until the next year. I'm venturing to guess that Bowie was maybe the biggest get in those early years for SNL.
Mm-hmm. I'd say that's pretty much on the nose. And what I like is it's embracing the new, right? Like at that time they could have, I know, like they were They were still trying to get the Beatles to come back, like Lorne was offering checks. They were very much interested in some of those New York bands, but they weren't exactly what I'd call leading edge with a lot of the music. So having somebody like Bowie who comes out and does something a little artier, a little kookier, it's them embracing the way that rock is changing, and the way that rock is changing from, four white boys copying blues into something a little bit more experimental, a little bit more arty, a little bit more New York. Bowie, of course, is an English artist, but those records, they feel, along with being very, very Berlin, obviously, they feel very at home with the New York vibe at the time of bands like Television and Talking Heads and those kinds of bands.
I think it maybe lent some credibility in some ways to being a musical guest on SNL. And because before that, we would see a lot of, Randy Newman, of course, Paul Simon, he's buddies with Lorne Michaels. He appeared in those early years, but a lot of it was blues musicians who were great, but they didn't have like the cultural cachet. They didn't pop culturally necessarily like David Bowie did. So this was a great get for SNL. Again, his first appearance, season 5, episode 7. This was in December of 79. This was a few months after he released Lodger. I've never actually heard anybody say this.
I always call it
name
Lodger.
Out loud.
Yeah.
Well, I've always called it Lodger, so we'll go with that. He released Lodger a few months prior to this. The host was Martin Sheen, so we could delve in. Unless you have anything else to say about Bowie in the 70s, could delve into this first appearance.
No, let's go for it. I mean, I could, we could be doing a whole other show.
Sure.
If we were doing that, but Lodger, it's a great place for him to be showing up. It ends off his Berlin trilogy. As I said, it's him very, very much in his prime. He's gonna kind of take a weird and interesting wander after this, but it's a great place for him to show up.
And the first song that he did was not from that album. It was The Man Who Sold the World from the album The Man Who Sold the World. What did you think of this performance of The Man Who Sold the World?
So the one thing I adore about this first performance is that he is very much playing the New York art gallery nerd. He's putting on these performances that will influence David Byrne and influence Lady Gaga, all of these in the best ways. Like I'm a big believer in lineage when it comes to rock and roll. I don't look at somebody and turn up my nose and be like, David Bowie did that first. I love seeing the influences. Yeah, he does this very cool installation art performance. Kanye will cop to this later on, where he's in this huge suit and he's basically like almost wheeled out, although he's carried by these two aliens who are completely
those spooky looking guys who also served as the backup singers.
who are completely blasé about all things, but they carry Bowie out to the microphone like they're wheeling out Hannibal Lecter. And he starts out like that's kind of a flex. He's like, I'm going to start with something I did a while ago. I'm promoting a new record, but I'm not going to start with that. I'm going to go back and remind you why I'm here. And he slays, as he always does.
I might prefer this, just the performance and the sound of it. I might prefer this to the album version, quite honestly. I think it was maybe a little more textured. It had so many layers, and I think just I listening to it, I was like, God, this is so good. Like I like the album version. Quite honestly, I like Nirvana's version on Unplugged better than Bowie's album version. But this really popped to me. I thought it was really interesting. I think the two scary looking dudes, the backup singers, added to it quite a bit. So I really enjoyed this performance, and visually it was something that SNL didn't always do back then, is have like, as you said, the performance art aspect.
No, because you need that part I feel is driven from the artist. I feel like every time they book somebody, they're like, okay, so you know what the set is and you know what you're working with, good luck. And I think it can be on the artist to come back to them and say, well, I want to turn it into a bedroom the way that Lizzo did, or I want to turn it into, just a blank white wall the way that Kanye did. It's on them to change what's in front of you that much. And the set is still static. Like, it's not like David Bowie is doing anything really drastic with the train station set behind him. But he was the one who's like, all right, boys, you're going to put me in this big clunky suit and you're going to wheel me out forward so that I'm going to sing. Standing stark still, mind you. Like, he's not so much as a sway. He's very much locked in place. And yet you can't take your eyes off him because it's the song is that good and he's so charismatic doing it.
Yeah, that's the thing about Bowie is he's someone who you can't take your eyes off. To me, he's one of the most interesting looking people I think who has ever lived. And every time you see him, he has a different look. Like Gaga today, every time you see Lady Gaga, she looks different. That was Bowie back then. And he pulled off anything. He was just so visually just an interesting person to look at.
The thing that's wild too is that's a handsome dude. Like that guy rolls out of bed and just like puts on jeans and a black t-shirt, and that's a good looking cat. He does not need to do anything. He does not need to put on makeup. He does not need to change his hair. He does not need to put on a crazy outfit. He just shows up as a gorgeous human being. And yet, throughout his career, he's like, I'm going to dye my hair bright orange. I am going to dress like an alien. I'm only going to wear the white suit. And it's like, okay, cool. Because you just go along with it. It's like he's eschewing his natural beauty because he doesn't feel like that's interesting enough.
Yeah, everything he did made sense with his style. Yeah, even if I couldn't pull any of that stuff off, most of us couldn't. But anything that he tried, he pulled off. Whether it was like, we saw his style kind of change with the times, as we will see it here on SNL. But even as he got older, he had what I call like the cool dad kind of haircut.
He grew into it like that. I don't know how he aged that way, especially considering later on in life he was very sick. But he aged so incredibly.
He's like a one of one in terms of just the style. Like few people, Prince could probably pull off a lot of things, but maybe not as many different types of things as Bowie.
And then, the big suit he could have just kept trotting back out the big suit. We all would have got a laugh. But then he comes back out and does TVC 15. Again, not off the new record. So it's like, I have something out, but I'm not going to sing about that right now. It's like the opposite of a concert where they start with 6 new songs before they get to the stuff you love. At TVC 15, again, he's not going back out in the suit. Here, he's going out in like a blazer and a dress. He's doing his little sexually fluid androgynous thing that will spark a whole other movement, again influencing a lot of artists to come, influencing the culture to a better place, I think. So he's out there, he's kind of dressed like a glam schoolmarm, and now the aliens are bored. Now the aliens are reading the newspaper, and what's the other alien doing? The other alien is walking his dog.
Yeah, there's a little poodle with the TV.
With the TV in its mouth. So it's like, okay, we gave them the suit and that worked, but we can't give them the suit again because they won't buy that. What else can we do? All right, let's dress me somewhat in drag, not fully in drag. And you guys just act bored. Just act aloof. Sing when we need you to. Trade the newspaper and the dog, and that will work.
Yeah, and everything that happens makes sense. Everything that he wears makes sense. It just... Given who he is, all of this weird stuff on stage makes sense.
Yeah,
you gotta tip your cap to that. I love it. That was TVC 15 from station to station. So we're not even getting anything yet from his new album. But the third song, which by the way, pretty cool. They let him perform 3 songs. That didn't always happen.
They don't do that. Yeah, they don't. I know. That's usually a sign that they're really happy that you're there. when they give you a third. I can only count on like a very few instances where they give you a third. They still do. Every once in a while, they'll give you a third song, but it's really, really rare. Sometimes I think it's because they're light on material. Boys Keep Swinging. I mean, as you know, just when you think he's fired the gun empty, Boys Keep Swinging is
wild.
It starts out so normal. It actually starts out like the Nazi boys singing in Cabaret, where it's just from the neck up. And you're like, oh, this is pretty. And then this shot reveals and you're like, oh, it's a little Nazi boy singing. That's not what David Bowie did here. That's in Cabaret. Watch that movie. It's an incredible movie. And when that moment comes, it's horrifying. No, in here, David Bowie is singing from the neck up and you're thinking everything is normal.
Heaven loves you. The clouds part for you. Nothing stands in your way when you're a boy. Clothes always fit you. Life is a pop of the cherry when you're a boy. When you're a boy, you can wear a uniform when you're a boy.
And then the shot pans down and he's basically composited with a marionette that's being shot off stage. And he's like following the marionette. He's not just sticking in place. He actually can see what the puppeteer is doing with the doll and how it's making it dance. And his head is following it. People can't see, obviously, because it's an audio medium. But his head is like bobbing back and forth, or his head is, bouncing along with the puppet. And it's just such a delight to watch.
Yeah, it was jarring. And so you're saying, I was trying to figure out how they were doing this. And so the marionette was on a different, so Bowie was on the stage and the marionette was on a different stage.
It's kind of hard to figure out exactly how they're doing it.
I was trying to figure it out. Yeah.
But like Bowie can clearly see what the puppet is doing in real time. So I don't know if one camera is pointing at him in front of a green screen and another camera is pointing at the puppet and they're nearby, but they don't happen to be on the stage with the band. That may very well be what it is, but they're definitely aware of each other. They're definitely in proximity to the band. That's one where I would love a shot. I'd love a behind the scenes shot where I can see how they did it. Cause it's also, it's really low budget. It's not, it's not any kind of like Avatar trickery here,
This was 1979.
Yeah. So it's something you could probably do with your phone. But it's delightful. It's so kooky. It's all hanging on a song that's like not exactly one of his bangers. You got to go like 20 songs deep or so, or 30 songs deep before people start talking about Boys Keep Swinging. But the song slaps. The performance is amazing. He finishes off his little gallery residency and, shows SNL how it's done.
I would have loved to see, like you said, I would have loved to know what this looked like to the studio audience to be there. But Bowie was just so perfect at coordinating his movements with that marionette and turning it into a cohesive thing. That's impressive. In 1979, I bet people were watching going like, what the hell? This is awesome. I was watching it today going like, this is so fun to watch.
Yeah, it's wonderful.
Do you think that these performances on SNL like captured Bowie's late 70s essence? Like, do you think fans got what they wanted with these performances?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, this is back in the day where seeing a band only ever, if you either went to a concert if they came near your town or you saw them on TV, like there was, there was no YouTube, there were no videos, like you, and not only that, but there were very seldom like reruns, right? Or you had to, it was appointment television. You had to be on the living room floor, or you had to be on the couch at midnight on Saturday night, Sunday morning to see these things. So, if they, I think he may have even thought of that, that at the time when people are seeing bands on television, that they are making a point to see them, because this is long before TV was just company in the room or like, God forbid, a second screen. If something was on, you were generally watching it with intent. So he probably thought, if somebody's watching me with intent, I want to give them a show.
I was really impressed with all three of these, visually and the songs too. Everything kind of gelled. And so that was like right under the wire as far as like him getting on SNL in the 70s. That was the second to last episode of the entire decade. So he went the entire 80s without appearing on SNL.
Which is weird because his music, like we talked about this with Prince, like Prince took a really long wander in between appearances, but Prince also took a really long wander with his career. Bowie in the 80s was very, very poppy, very much more FM radio. Like his songs were a lot slicker. He wasn't doing the arty, weird, alien, I'm going to dress in a giant suit while the aliens are bored behind me thing anymore. He was doing something much more commercial with songs like Let's Dance and Modern Love and those kinds of things. Love them, but they feel much more like they could have been done by just about anybody. But the thing is, they suit what SNL was doing in the 80s very much. So it's kind of interesting that he never showed up for any of that.
Yeah, I'm surprised. What Let's Dance, the album came out in 83? Thereabouts. So I think he would have been a great fit on there. And there's well known, I mean, Modern Love, Let's Dance, China Girl, Cat People. Like there was some really beloved songs.
Yeah.
Off of
and he was touring. He was big. Like
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't like he was being that guy in the cabin off in the woods. That would come later. But he was around, he was doing stuff, he was touring, he was, doing duets with Mick Jagger. For whatever reason, he just never showed up.
I think especially with that album too, I think he adapted to like the 80s sound. He made it Bowie, but he still fit into what the overall vibe was of that time. And maybe
it's always
Ebersol,
cool.
I don't know, maybe Ebersol didn't love him. I don't
Could be. I mean, it's always cool to talk about Bowie's fans because everybody has like their era of Bowie that they love. Stones fans, it's kind of same sort of thing. People love 60 Stones, people love 70 Stones. There's a lot of people who swear by 70s Bowie, and then everything after 1979 is trash. Or there's people who came in much later and find those 90s records really, really interesting and really, really wonderful, and anything before or after that is weird. So it's Bowie's that's one of the things that I love about him, is that because he's got all of these movements like an artist, like you can see he's very, very much inspired by the great artists who had their movements. He lends himself to people coming in and out of his work at various points.
Yeah, where do you find yourself on that spectrum of preferences? Does it vary just by what mood you're in?
It does, actually. I really clung to him in late 90s, so I have a soft spot for some of those late 90s records that we're going to talk about in a second. Mm-hmm. As time went on, I grew to appreciate more and more of, I then like jumped straight back to the 70s stuff first, and the 80s stuff kind of took a minute with me. I have a bittersweet fondness for those last two records just because I found them so intricate and unexpected. Like he had, as I mentioned, he'd been gone for quite some time, and I'd actually kind of squared myself to the fact that he may be gone permanently because it'd been so long with him not doing anything until, of course, he was completely gone. But I very much, I love a lot of it, but I do have a soft spot for those 90 records because that's where I joined the circus.
His second appearance on SNL, like I said, went through the entire 80s without appearing on SNL. His second appearance was in November of 91, season 17. A pretty memorable episode, honestly. Macaulay Culkin hosted this episode. And I have visceral, kind of vivid memories of as a child of Macaulay Culkin saying,
"Ladies and gentlemen, Tin Machine."
Yeah. And at the time when I was a little kid, I didn't really know who David Bowie, like I think I knew the name, but
I probably knew him as that guy from Labyrinth.
Yeah, honestly, yeah. Like Labyrinth, I knew him from there, but I didn't put it together that Tin Machine was David Bowie's band. I thought it was just some band that I had never heard of. But Ryan, are you a big Tin Machine guy?
Not so much.
Yeah.
Tin Machine it's a strange little moment in his career because it comes as an answer to the poppy, glossy, mainstream commercial 80s music that he was doing. He found himself restless and dissatisfied, understandably, even though, I would say that a lot of that 80s music has its merit. He just didn't like where he was at and the kind of people he was drawing into the theater. So he decided to take a break and do something different and go work with other people and create this little band Tin Machine. Here's the really strange thing, is that it's not it doesn't feel like that hard of a swing away from what he's doing of everything he ever did. It feels just fine. It doesn't feel like a drastic shift back to the art stuff. It's not what I'd call like especially harder. It kind of feels like it's in between the eras of music, you know, like, yeah, in a time where Metallica and Guns N' Roses and Motley Crue were the biggest things in rock, this feels very different. But considering that at the same time, Pearl Jam and Red Hot Chili Peppers and Nirvana are about to take over, this feels like a step behind all of them. So, I mean, they're good. It's a good performance. It's not the Aliens, and there's no suit.
It's very 90s aesthetically.
Yeah.
So 90s.
All of it.
Yeah. The first song they did is called Baby Universal, and I was surprised. I actually liked these performances more than I expected. I expected it to be a huge drop off because it wasn't like Bowie. It was a side project. But I think I came to the conclusion that I would still like this if it wasn't Bowie. Like, I think it fits in fine. Like, it was a fine, good, enjoyable performance, in my opinion.
I mean, I'm curious for sure. I'm not thinking that I feel sad that I missed it in its moment. There's a lot of stuff that I was really late to the party, and I'm like, why wasn't I listening to this then? This is not one of those moments.
Right.
I'm like, oh, cool. I've got something new that I can find out about. He's very styled in this. You know, he's not doing the arty weirdo. He's very, very much, a handsome dude in like leather jackets and sharp collars and that kind of thing.
What is it, mid to late 40s around this time? 1991?
Late 40s, thereabout, the mid 40s.
So he's like a cool guy who's in his mid 40s in the early 90s.
Yeah,
and he wears it well.
Yeah, it's what I thought was cool about this too is it's really awesome to have this band documented in the landscape of SNL. Like, that's one of the things I like about this show is that it's around for a lot of these moments that are interesting experiments that people may forget about. Like, correct me if I'm wrong, but there is an episode where the musical guest is Chris Gaines, right?
Yeah, well, Garth Brooks hosted and the musical guest was Chris Gaines, yeah.
If you tried to explain that to somebody now who was not around at the time, it would seem bananas. And yet it's like, no, it's right there in the archive. Go watch it.
And it's a perfect snapshot of that time.
Yeah.
Too, and we're thankful that it's there. Yeah, for sure. And I would have to say Tin Machine, I mean, they're good musicians too. David Bowie got Tony Fox sales, Hunt sales, and then Reeves Gabrels, he's in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame as a member of The Cure. And
Reeves is going to play with him for a while too.
Yeah.
So it's kind of neat because you're seeing the beginning of a relationship.
Yeah, it's really neat. And their second song, to me, I think the vocals especially sounded more classic Bowie.
Yeah.
The way he was singing, his inflection.
Yeah.
The song's called If There Is Something.
Takes me right back when we were young. So you practice giving to the air. Watch them fall down when we were young.
To me, that sounded like that's how I know Bowie.
Yeah, that one was better of the two.
Yeah, I think I preferred that one as well because, like, it's that warm blanket of Bowie that we're probably used to.
Totally.
So that was Tin Machine. That was his second episode on SNL season 17. And then we go about 6 years before the next one, 1997. That was season 22 in February of 97. He's promoting Earthling, which was released about 5 days prior. Yeah, tell us about Earthling. You said you started liking around this era of
this
Bowie.
Is very much where I show up. So I had found myself very interested in the record that came before, Outside. And that was kind of my gateway drug to Bowie. I started listening to old Bowie around that time. Became very, very interested in him as an artist, his looks and whatnot, and listened to the older stuff. So this was, the first one that it dropped, and I latched right away. I was lucky in that this is where I got to see him perform a show.
Oh, wow.
And he was performing this record mixed in with his older work. So I have a soft spot for this record. It is very late 90s.
Yes.
It is very, very, grunge is over, electronic is taking over.
To me, it sounded like The Prodigy. Like
yes.
this song Little Wonder,
Yeah.
the first song they performed, I got
Yeah.
the vibes of The Prodigy, which is
Absolutely.
total late 90s.
Stinky with a fat, shaky hand. Don't be mourning, Doc, grumpy nose. Little wonder then, little wonder. You, little wonder you. Big screen dolls, tits and explosions. Sleepy time, tan. Little wonder then, little wonder. You, little wonder you.
It begins with this beautiful drum lick, which unfortunately is a drum machine. The drummer is just sitting there waiting for his turn. and when the drums come in, they're fantastic. But it's amazing that this really quick and steady drum line is a machine. Bowie is kind of reminding you again of his Aladdin Sane time. Like he's got the bright orange hair again. Again, he's very, very, his look here is very like sharp and demon-like. He's got this big collar. He's got this very 90s goatee on his chin. Yeah. But again, this could just be me talking fondly about the era where I walked into. It's incredible. It's wonderful. It's powerful. It's strong. Mm-hmm. It's loud. And it's very, very interesting. Again, he's not trying to style up the performance. That I found a little bit weird, because this era he was wearing this really great Union Jack coat at the time. If people find the cover of Earthling, he had this really great coat around the same time that the Spice Girls were wearing it as a dress. It was a very, very big time for England. So, but he didn't wear that on SNL, even though he was wearing that for some of his concerts. And it's fantastic.
Yeah, what I love, this is an example to me of something that I love about Bowie, is that he doesn't thumb his nose at the trends of the day.
No, he's interested.
He's interested in it, and he really embraces it. Like we see, like we're hearing electronic elements in this first song in this album, Earthling. Yeah. He works with Trent Reznor, obviously, maybe a couple years after this, around this time. So I love that he embraces.
This was around the time he was he was touring.
He was touring with Trent.
Yeah, the tour before this. Yeah.
Yeah, so he's embracing that stuff, and I love it. He's not one of the old school guys who's just sticking to what he knows, and everything in my day was great and everything now sucks. Yeah. Like, I love that he embraces new things in music.
I mean, he was friends with John Lennon, and John had that too, right? Like, John was always interested in doing new and interesting and different things. So it's it makes sense that the two of them would be cut from the same kind of cloth.
Yeah, definitely. And the second performance here, it's a throwback. He gives older Bowie fans something that they love. He performs Scary Monsters.
She was tired on our dates. When I looked in her eyes, they were blue, nobody harmed. She could have been a killer if she didn't walk the way she do. She opened strange doors we'd never close again. She began to wail Genesis screams, waving at the lights, you know what I mean.
I love this song, and I think it was such a great performance. I love seeing something. Scary Monsters came out in 1980, so it was like a late 70s, early 80s kind of still Bowie vibe.
Yeah, it's the hinge from one era into the other. What I love about this, and with like, if we put the Tin Machine performance aside for a second, all of his other three performances, he does something new and then shows you how it fits with something old. Or in the case of the first one, he does the old stuff and then shows you how it fits with the new stuff. So doing Scary Monsters Super Creeps and kind of making it just that little bit harder than it was on the record, and showing you how well it fits with something like Little Wonder. You know, to anybody who's like, oh, I liked him better when he was doing Scary Monsters. It's like, well, this is very much like Scary Monsters, just, you know, we're doing it a little harder. Reeves is just shredding on this performance, just absolutely wailing. Bowie is going for it. There's so much bravado in this performance. It's just so cool to see.
Yeah, I love that he's given the people what they want. Yeah, essentially. I mean, he's doing a great performance of a new song, but he's like, I'm going to go back to 1980, and and when you discount, like, if you don't include the Tin Machine performances, these are 5 songs and 5 different albums. So he performed from Lodger, Station to Station, The Man Who Sold the World. We're getting something from Earthling and Scary Monsters and Super Creeps. This is so cool to me. I love when artists say, well, we'll play you a new one, but then we're going to play you something that we know that you love. Like, we're going to take you back. So I love that again, like the lack of pretension that's in there.
I wish more artists would do it. Like, I know it's important to promote your new work. You know, especially when you may not get another chance. Like, I mean, not everybody is David Bowie. A lot of these bands are going to come on one time and they may never come again. So, you know, along with the fact that they may not have older work to draw on, they really want to make the most of why they're there. But the ones who do get another chance, or the ones who have been around for a minute, you know, play something older, rearrange it or something, and just let us see how it fits.
Yeah. So I think, you know, 3rd episode that he's appeared on as musical guest, I think we have a high batting average here. Even the Tin Machine stuff, honestly, I enjoyed. Yeah. Like, it was super enjoyable too. It surprised me how much I enjoyed his Tin Machine stuff. So I think we have a high batting average here with David Bowie on SNL. His 4th appearance, season 25, the first episode of the season, Jerry Seinfeld hosting this episode in 1999. And again, Bowie promoting his new album, Hours, but he's given us something old and something new. So the something new, Ryan, Thursday's Child from Hours.
Lucky old sun is in my sky. Nothing prepared me for a smile. Light on the darkness of my soul. Innocence in your arms.
So Thursday's Child, I actually kind of love. It's nothing complicated. It's not something that I would say is like, you know, top 20 Bowie or anything like that, but it's just so sweet. It's so comforting and just really lyrical. It's kind of like a Sundown kind of record. His performance is actually very subdued.
Yes.
He's dressed like he just walked out of Banana Republic.
This is the cool dad look that I was talking about. His hair's a little longer, but it's kind of parted in the middle. It's but it's shaggy, but it's like intentional. It's like, you're right. He looks like he walked out of Banana Republic. This is what I see. Like, I have an uncle who reminds me that he wears his hair like that so perfectly, and he just looks like a cool dad kind of vibe. And this is another different look that Bowie's just pulling off. That I wish I could, and I don't know, 15 to 20 years, I wish I could pull something like
exactly that. I will not, like, that's the thing, is that he still, you know, even with the fact that he looks, his outfit, I kind of wish that he was a little bit more styled, but the fact is he still looks like David Bowie. You know, this looks like David Bowie on Laundry Day.
Yeah. Did we mention he's married to a supermodel? He's married to a supermodel.
Yeah.
I mean, there's, you know.
It's a little odd. I mean, maybe that's the thing. He settled down now, so he doesn't have to try so hard. The song is beautiful. The album is somewhat forgettable. Hours is not even somebody who comes to him in the late 90s. It's not one of the records that a lot of people mention. It was kind of Thursday's Child and done, but it's a beautiful song. It's a lovely song. Really sweet, really romantic. You know, there's no angle on this one. It's just, here's a guy who can sing and he's going to sing for you.
Yeah, I love that it's highlighting his voice, his singing. And that was the main thing that stood out to me, obviously. It's just like, this is Bowie's voice. We're highlighting that. Yeah. And I'm fine with it being more of a subdued performance. I think it shows a different side of him as a performer that I think is necessary. I think it was a really good addition to the night. And that's, I think it especially works because we're getting like a really rockin' song to close the night, a throwback.
Yeah.
Again, a song that I've always loved, Rebel Rebel from
Yeah.
Diamond Dogs. One of his big songs that I think a lot of people love.
This is usually one of the showstoppers. Again, he reminds you how the new stuff fits with the old stuff. It's all swagger. This performance is all, I know how much you all love this song. I know how much you're all going to lose it, and I will not disappoint. I'm not going to act above it. I am not going to act like I'm tired of singing it. I'm here because I know you enjoy it, and it's wonderful. He even kind of like cozies up to his bass player for the lines like, not sure if you're a boy or a girl. Hey baby, your hair's all right. She's a bald woman of color, so of course there would be kind of that fluidity to her appearance. And anytime a woman's hair is bald, it's I love your hair. No, who cares if your hair is bald? It's great to see him reinterpreting those lyrics in that kind of way. And I think what I love about it the most is it shows that, we started with the dog and the TV in his mouth, and we started with the puppets, and we started with the aliens. Like, we started with arty shtick. But the reality is that even if he didn't use the arty shtick, if he just went out and sang Rebel Rebel, or if he just went out and sang Man Who Sold the World, it wouldn't have mattered, because the thing is, the work is genius. So you can dress it up and you can have fun with it, and you can give your audience something more. Because you want to, and you want to create, and you want to find and build these little lasting moments. But if you strip it away and the work is still genius, it doesn't matter. It still holds.
Right. And if he did the arty shtick in 1999, like he was in the 70s, it probably wouldn't have come across as authentic, because that's not where he was as a creative person and in his life, probably in the time. That's just not what he was interested in. So if he just forced himself to do the arty shtick, it probably would have fallen flat. I think if he wasn't like as invested in it. I want to see him be authentic to himself.
Yeah, I mean, he will still keep calling back to those earlier records on the records to come, like stuff that he wouldn't even play on SNL, like records like when he will later get to Heathen has a lot of callbacks to, other singers. Like, he does covers on Heathen, but he calls back to a lot of his Berlin albums. Certainly later on, when he will do The Next Day, The Next Day is a callback to kind of his whole career. So he's going to keep
cover on The Next Day is a callback to Heroes. Because it's just a box that says The Next Day over Heroes album cover.
Yeah, so he's going to do that, and he will continue to find the way that the new work can be informed by the old work, not copying the old work exactly. Like, he's not, as much as I love the Stones, he's not doing the Stones. He's finding new ways to add chapters to those earlier stories without necessarily needing to dress in the white suit or dress like the alien or get in the dress. It's an interesting, it's a very mature approach to rock and roll and to, art pop.
Yeah, I agree. And we see it here, his relationship to older material in 1999 with Rebel Rebel. This was a song, I don't know if you saw this tour, but this was a song that he hadn't played for like a decade. And he decided to start playing it again on the tour. And you mentioned like it's one that really gets the crowd excited and going. He decided to reintroduce it to his set list. I guess he took out the Quaaludes reference in the song. Maybe that's why he had a tough time performing it. But I guess from what I read, he took out the reference to Quaaludes in Rebel Rebel once he started performing it again. But that's just something that, he took a song, he maybe saw an aspect that he didn't love about it, but then he made it work again. He's like, hey, I want to perform this again.
Yeah. And later on he would play with the intro. Like the intro would actually be stripped down and sound really lovely before the blaring guitar came in at the top of the first chorus. He was always interested in doing that and kind of leaving some songs behind and bringing them back in. And, he was never the guy who's like, I don't want to play that anymore ever. He got tired of things and he needed to find them again. But he always found his way eventually, even down to stuff like, even down to some of that stuff like the 80s stuff that he was trying to get away from with Tin Machine. By the time I saw him again in 2003 or 2004, I think the concert was, he was starting the shows with songs like China Girl and Modern Love and those kinds of songs where it's like, I kind of thought you were ready to put all this stuff in a box.
Man, I wish I could have seen him. I'm like jealous. You're telling me that you've been able to see him 2 or 3 times?
Two times. And one of the first one, I got really, really, really lucky. The first of the 2 times was in a club of about 1,500 people. And it was completely because I met the right person at the right time and they had a ticket. I got in good and close and had a transformative experience watching David Bowie in that kind of room. I'm really, really lucky, and I always count myself really, really lucky that I had that experience.
Gosh, yeah. I used to go to the Coachella Festival I think I've been 6 or 7 times, and I used to spend time on the Coachella message board. And one of the topics every single year when Coachella still, they were less electronic and poppy and more, they would book more indie and not necessarily, not like David Bowie's indie, but he appeals to those sensibilities maybe a little bit more. But that was always the one artist who everybody would request and want to headline every single year is maybe this is the year that we're going to get Bowie. This is the year. You think Bowie's going to headline? It never happened. I always thought that maybe that would be the chance I had to see him. But how was he as performer?
He was incredible. He was touring. He was touring Earthling. He was mixing the set really, really nicely. Like he started the set with Quicksand and it was just him and Reeves, and Reeves was playing an acoustic guitar to start the set. And then, things would come and go. He was playing very electronic at the time. So some of these songs sounded like they were a little bit rearranged. But it was fantastic. And he's, I like the set list is kind of blurring in my brain right now, but it was just, trial by fire for me and just kind of very overwhelming. I got like one of my favorite concert photos I've ever taken is from that show. So I'll send that to you after we're done. Yeah. And maybe you want to include it in the show notes because it's a pretty good shot. This thing that's interesting as well about Bowie that, where maybe we should leave off is after this moment. So from 99, he's got about another 4 years of an active career. And then he's going to go away for 10 years. He's going to go away for a very long time. And nobody would ever actually really know why. He would show up. He was around. It wasn't that he was reclusive or it wasn't that he was, we know he was sick, but he wasn't so sick that he couldn't go out. He would show up at things like Fashion Week or gallery openings in New York. He did a little, he would do little movie cameos and stuff like Zoolander and The Prestige, of course. Mm-hmm. But he didn't record. He went from like 2003 to when was the next? I think the next day was
2013.
Yeah, that's a
10 year.
And I was very much under the impression of Bowie is gone. Certainly after like you get to 6 or 7 years of that, I'm like, he's just done. He wants to do other things. He didn't make a formal announcement. He didn't say I'm retired or anything like that. It was kind of part of the mystique of where'd David go? So it was a very strange thing to see. We all just kind of shrugged and be like, well, he's off living his life. And then, he would come back for this very brief little curtain call right at the end of his life. Yeah. The last 3 years of his life. And in the case of his final album, literally the last week of his life. And then off he went into the stars. It was a really, really surreal thing to live through as a fan. And, and it's interesting that SNL ends its relationship with Bowie right before that little sabbatical.
Yeah. And I guess from how you're describing and how I'm remembering the arc of his career, it does make sense that 99 was his last appearance on SNL. And I remember when the next day came out, it was a shock, like amongst me and my music nerd friends. It's like, oh my gosh,
new song. What do you mean new song?
Like, what's going on? And I thought the next day was okay. Like I wasn't floored by it or anything. But I thought it was just nice to hear Bowie back, and I enjoyed it. But Black Star is the one that like floored me, and I genuinely loved it. And the timing was eerie, and what Black Star came out, it was a 4-day gap between when Black Star was released and Bowie passed away.
Yep.
And it almost sounded like Bowie was intentionally giving us this thing because he knew that he wouldn't be here much longer.
I'm reasonably sure. Yeah, I'm reasonably sure he knew. There are Easter eggs all over that thing. Like, I mean, right down to the fact that a black star is another term for a cancerous tumor. He knew. He must have known, and that's the only reason why he decided to do it when he did. But I mean, there would be a little bit more music that would have been neat to have him show off. Like, it would have been great if he had shown off something from Reality, and certainly from Heathen, that record that we both struggled to remember what it was called. They're good records. They're actually, I think they're better than Ours, which he promoted with Singing Thursday's Child. Again, it could have just been the timing, or it could have been even just the musical landscape. The early O's was a very, very weird time for music, and David Bowie didn't really fit into what was happening there. So It could have just been, it's like, well, we could get David Bowie, or hey, let's get the Strokes. It's that kind of thing if you're booking.
Yeah, I think it was a fine SNL send-off in 99, and it was just a perfect, send-off as far as just his final album and how it coincided with the end of his life and everything. And that was just, I remember talking to some friends about it, and it was almost the feeling like, this is like perfect classic Bowie to give this to the world, give this Black Star album to the world before he leaves us.
There are worse things in life than being your last SNL performance. Be Rebel Rebel. So
yeah, then that's perfect. That's well put too. Is Rebel Rebel. It was maybe like the perfect way to go out on SNL for sure. So Ryan, we're at the point of the show where we kind of sum this up in a tidy little way, and I want you to address our SNL Hall of Fame voters now and tell them why they should at least consider David Bowie for the SNL Hall of Fame.
I believe that you need to consider him on that first performance alone. On 3 songs in a night, it's one of those magic numbers. It's right up there with like 5 timers. It's right up there with Dave Grohl and his however many. What is he on there? 16 times? What did he say?
Something 14,
something like that. By the time this goes to air, maybe he might have more because they have a new record out. So he's a 3-song performer. And that first performance just is so delightfully arty and cool and funny and kooky, and really sums up exactly where this person was in his career and what he meant to where music would go in, the decades ahead, and how he would influence Talking Heads and Lady Gaga and Janelle Monáe and all of these other artists who saw themselves in the arty weirdo, or, the non-conforming gender identity, and wanted to marry the music stage with the art gallery in the best ways.
It always throws me, man. That bass breakdown, it always throws me. But there it is. That's Ryan McNeil, friend of the show, 5-timer, and eloquent speaker. Between him and Matt, I feel like we have a very good sense of, Bowie, both his career and his impact that he had on SNL. And I think there's a good case if we look at the musical guests that have been nominated in the past. He's got to be in that fringe of people that are bound for the Hall of Fame ultimately. I just think he transcends the show, and yet he's able to be on the show at the same time. It's a big thing, and I'd like to see if he can make his way into the Hall of Fame. But that's up to you. That's how it works. It's not up to me. It's up to you. And I hope you take into account everything that you've heard thus far. But if you need any more of a nudge toward Bowie and his validity, then look no further, because I've got a great track for you right now that I'm going to share. This is David Bowie, the man who sold the world, on the SNL Hall of Fame podcast.
Upon the stair and spoke of once and when, although I wasn't there. He said I was his friend, which came as some surprise. I spoke into his eyes. I thought you died alone a long, long time ago. Shook his hand. I made my way back home. I roamed the little land. For years and years I roamed. I gazed a gazely stare at all the millions here. We must have died alone a long, long time ago.
That was great. That was really great. I encourage you to go out and watch the YouTube video of that performance. It's great. It comes from the Christmas episode, December 15th, 1979, with Martin Sheen hosting. And it's performance art. It's not only is it a tremendous song, and it's tough for me to remember a world before Live at New York when Kurt Cobain and Nirvana covered the song, but this is Bowie's song. This is very clearly Bowie's song, and he does wonders with it, and it's really quite lovely. And I think that should seal the deal. I don't know. I'm not saying he's a first ballot Hall of Famer. I'm not saying that, but I'm feeling pretty good about his chances. That's just a hunch that you get sometimes when you hang around the hall as much as I do. You get these hunches, and that's what you got to do. So the hunches is also the reason I am getting those spine massages, I should say. If you've been listening the whole time, you might understand that. At any rate, that's what I've got for you this week. I want to thank Matt and Thomas as always, Ryan McNeil as our guest. But now, if you do me a favor and on your way out, as you walk past the Weekend Update exhibit, turn out the lights because the SNL Hall of Fame is now closed.
Thanks for listening to the SNL Hall of Fame podcast. Make sure to rate, review, share, and subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. Follow us on social media at SNL HOF. This is Doug DeNance saying, see you next week.
To podcasts and such.